The Castle by Franz Kafka. Chapter 21. I am your narrator. When Kay woke up, he thought at first that he had hardly slept at all. The room was just the same, warm and empty. All the walls in darkness, but with one electric light above the beer pools and night outside the windows. When he stretched, the cushion fell to the floor, and the board and the casks creaked. Peppy arrived at once, and now he discovered that it was evening and he had slept for over 12 hours. The landlady had asked him several times during the day, and Gearstacker, who had been sitting here over a beer in the dark when Kay spoke to the landlady in the morning, but hadn't liked to disturb him, had also looked in once to see how he was. Finally, it appeared that Frida too had come in and stood beside Kay for a little while. But she hadn't really come on his account, only because she had several things to get ready here before returning to her old job that evening. I suppose she doesn't fancy you anymore, asked Peppy, as she brought coffee and cakes. However, she asked not in her old malicious way, but sadly, as if now she had come to know the malice of the world for herself, and beside it, any personal malice pales and loses its point. She spoke to Kay like a companion in misfortune, and when he tasted the coffee, and she thought she saw that it wasn't sweet enough for him, she went off and brought him the full sugar bowl. It was true that her melancholy had not kept her from decking herself out today, even more extravagantly, perhaps, than last time Kay had seen her. She wore a profusion of bows and ribbons threaded through her hair, which she had carefully arranged with curling tongs over her forehead and temples. Around her neck, she wore a necklace hanging down into the low-cut neck of her blouse. When Kay, feeling glad to have had a long sleep and good coffee, surreptitiously took hold of one of the bows and tried to undo it, Peppy said wearily, "Leave me alone," and sat down on a cask beside him. Kay didn't have to ask why she was unhappy, for she began telling him at once. Her gaze fixed on Kay's coffee pot, as if she needed something to distract her mind as she told him about it. As if even when she thought about her suffering, it was more than she could do to give herself up to it entirely. First, Kay discovered that he himself was to blame for Peppy's unhappiness. But she didn't bear him a grudge for that, she said, and she nodded eagerly as she told her tale to keep Kay from contradicting anything. First, he had taken Frida away from the bar and thus made it possible for Peppy to rise to the position of barmaid. She, Peppy, could think of nothing else that might have induced Frida to give up her post. She sat there in the bar like a spider in its web, casting her threads far and wide as only she could. It would have been impossible to remove her against her will. Only love for someone of low status, a love that was unfit for her position, could drive her from it. And what about Peppy? Had she ever aspired to a post like this for herself? She was a chambermaid. She had an insignificant job with few prospects. Like every other girl, she dreamed of a wonderful future. You can't forbid anyone to dream, but she didn't seriously expect to get very far. She had come to terms with what she had already attained. And then Frida suddenly left the bar, so suddenly that the landlord didn't have a suitable replacement to hand. He looked around and his eye fell on Peppy, who had certainly done her own part here by putting herself forward. At that time, she loved Kay as she had never loved anyone before. She had been living for months in her tiny, dark room down below and expected to spend years there, her whole life, if the worst came to worst, with no one paying her any attention. And then along came Kay, all of a sudden, a hero, a deliverer of maidens, and he had opened the way for her to rise. Not that he knew anything about her. He hadn't done it for her sake. But that didn't make her any less grateful. On the night when she was appointed barmaid, the appointment wasn't certain yet, but it was very probable. She spent hours talking to him, whispering her thanks into his ear. What he had done seemed even greater to her because the burden he had taken on his own shoulders was Frida. There was something amazingly unselfish in the fact that to free Peppy from her predicament, he was making Frida his mistress, an unattractive, thin girl, not as young as she used to be, with short, sparse hair, a sly girl too, who always had secrets of some kind. Just the thing you might expect from her appearance, although her face and body were undoubtedly a miserable sight. She must at least have had other secrets that no one could know about. Perhaps to do with her alleged relationship with Clam. At the time, Peppy even entertained ideas like this. Was it possible that Kay really loved Frida? Wasn't he deceiving himself? Or was he perhaps deceiving no one but Frida? And would the only result of all this be just Pepe's rise in the world? Would Kay see his mistake then, or stop trying to hide it and take notice of Pepe instead of Frida? That wasn't such a wild idea of Pepe's, for as one girl against another, she could hold her own against Frida very well. No one would deny that. And it had been primarily Frida's position as barmaid and the luster with which Frida had managed to endow it that had dazzled Kay at the moment when he met her. And then Pepe had dreamed that when she had the position herself, Kay would come to plead with her, and she would have the choice of either listening to Kay and losing the job, or turning him down and rising higher. She had it worked out that she would give up everything and lower herself to his level and teach him the true love that he could never know with Frida, the love that is independent of all the grand positions in the world. But then it all turned out differently. And what was to blame for that? Kay, first and foremost, and then of course Frida's crafty, sly nature. Kay first, said Pepe, because just what did he want? What strange kind of person was he? What was he after? What important matters occupied his mind to make him forget all that was closest to him, all that was best and most beautiful?